Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. And thank you all for having me at your beautiful, though very freezing campus. I must say this must be the coldest day of the year, but being in upstate New York, at least you don't have the snow that we're having right now. And somewhere in an airport in Albany, New York, my car is buried, and I will find it tomorrow when I go back. So there's a lot to talk about here. And I'm going to do this so you can hear me. There's a lot to talk about here. Publishing is the greatest secret, but the greatest necessity for all people involved in academia. Why is it so? Why is it so hard for people to get it published? But more importantly, why is it that so many people whose careers and whose professional interests depend upon getting the word out about their subject matter, whether it be something in the material world, whether it be other human beings, whether it be great works of literature, why aren't we informed about it? Why aren't we empowered to make decisions? I did my work in anthropology. I have a PhD in archaeology from the University of Virginia. And when I went through graduate school program, I was told it was my responsibility as an anthropologist to disseminate the stories, the lives, the individuals that I was working with as an anthropologist. And I was told that it was necessary for me to get a tenure-track job, and to get tenure as well, I better, gosh darn, learn how to publish. But nobody told me how. And that is the sad story that is repeated again and again and again across the campuses of the United States and in Europe as well, is that something that is so critical to your professional advancement, but also to your good deeds that you do as academics in terms of getting the word out about your research, is absolutely not clearly transmitted to you, made available to you, nor are you trained in it. And so when I became an editor, an acquisition editor at the University of Nebraska Press in 1995, I decided I wanted to give back as much as possible that information, because it wasn't available to me, but it should be available to everyone on a regular basis. And so if I'm visiting a campus in order to follow up on a journal or talk to authors or whatever, I always try to offer a free publishing workshop. If I go to a conference, I try to give a publishing workshop. The words you hear today is what people at the American Anthropological Association pay $60 each to hear for some weird reason. So you get it free. Congratulations. Good grief. No, please, no applause. We'll see if you're still applauding in 20 minutes. We'll see about that. Okay, there's so much to tell. Let me give you a little background on my career in publishing so you can get a sense of how these things work from our point of view. I came to University of Nebraska Press with a PhD in archaeology. I was the first editor ever in the university press world who was devoted only to American Indian studies. And I built, if you look at American Indian books in academia, most of them come from Nebraska Press, and that was mostly the books that I acquired. I remember going through the Black Hills, and we stopped at the Crazy Horse Monument. I'm with my father, and we went into the bookstore, and I took a look, and there were 4 shelves of books that I had helped acquire for Nebraska Press. And I said, "Hey, Dad, take a look at these books." And he goes, "What? I thought you worked for a newspaper." You can imagine. So it was an education for my father as well as for me to understand that publishing goes beyond being the action scoop reporter, but it actually is involved in works and making available works that live well beyond us. And that's what is so sacred and what is so important about a publishing relationship, is that while it seems short-term to us, the results are going to live well beyond any of us in this room. And that should be our true legacy. And that should be the way that our stories and our memories and our professional experiences should be affecting those around us. So at Nebraska Press, I eventually became director, which was scary to a lot of people given that I started in a cubicle without furniture. But that was okay. I eventually became director, and then as of 2 years ago, I was asked, after a national search, to become director of the State University of New York Press, which is another university press, located in upstate New York in the city of Albany. I come from New England. My family arrived there in 1640. Most of them were afraid to leave except me. But I have now returned home in the grand circle of my life. So that's the end of that. Let's talk about how to get your book published. And I'm going to go through step by step a number of things that you might find common sense, but a lot of you probably haven't put it together in a kind of process-oriented way. Feel free to ask questions. You probably have to raise your hand so I can see you. That's okay. Just make sure that if I don't see you, call out so that if you have a question on the spot. This is supposed to be as interactive as someone standing on a stage way above you can be interactive, which isn't a heck of a lot, but we'll do the best that we possibly can. Step-by-step process, giving you the information so that you will be informed about what your choices are as an author. How many of you are working on dissertations or something like that? Oh my God, you're one of my kind. Hello, how are you? How many of you have finished your dissertation or are seeking a publisher? A few of you, thank you, okay. But I've already spoken to a few of you who have had some happy trails in getting published many times before. What we're going to talk about is finding the right publisher for you, but also talking about how publishing works. What happens to that pile of paper or that electronic file when you send it to a press? So, getting a book published, when is the time to make contact with the publisher? Is it always when you finish everything? Is it when you finish your dissertation, or is it sometime before then? At what point should you be reaching out to those of us scary people called publishers? It's not necessarily when you've actually finished it materially. It's when you have a sense of it conceptually as a whole. When you understand your manuscript project as a whole, that is when it is time to reach out to a publisher. Think about it. It makes sense, right? Because you're going to have a conversation, often in person, with a publisher, or you're going to be emailing or writing them a cover letter, and you better own your project mentally and know where it all is beginning and ending and what's the heart of the content. It doesn't mean that it's completely written, but you need to be able to own it conceptually before you approach a publisher, because we're going to be asking you questions about that work to see whether it fits with what we published. And if you're not prepared to answer those questions, if you don't own your work conceptually, then you probably aren't ready to talk to us. So, how do you know when you own your work conceptually? How do you know when it's time to talk to a publisher? It's time to when you can say in a sentence what your book is about without semicolons and all those things. Just a simple sentence. When you can say in a single sentence, what is your book about? Because that is the first question that you should be that you will be asked when you visit a publisher or you're talking to us on the phone. We'll say, what are you working on? Or what is it? And you need to be able to come back with a concise description of what it is. If you can't do that, that means you don't own your work yet. And that often happens even when you're beginning your dissertation or halfway through. You can say basically a concise sentence what it's about. That's a part of it. The other part of contacting a publisher, you know when it's time to contact a publisher when you can say in a single sentence why it matters. Because we're not only going to ask you what it is, but why does it matter? And of course, importance is going to be relative, isn't it? Some things are important for some people, but not for others. But you need to be aware of significance, because when I'm talking to you, I'm trying to decide whether or not I'm going to invest $15,000 of my press's money in good faith into making your book happen. And I need to know what it is, and I need to know why anybody would want to read it. And if you can't answer those two questions, either you're on the wrong track or you haven't developed your work enough in order to be able to own it. How do you know when to make contact with a publisher? When you can write down a tentative table of contents and add a few sentences to each of those chapters about what it's going to be about, that's when you own your whole narrative from beginning to end. How do you know when to contact a publisher? When you have a clear sense of who your audience is. People, how many times in the academic world do folks write books, and when you ask them who's supposed to read it, they really don't know? When you're writing a book, think of yourself as sitting down at a campfire and you're telling the story. Who is listening to you? Is it other scholars? That's fine. That's what a lot of what it's all about, is that a university press like a SUNY Press or University of Washington Press is going to facilitate communication between scholars. Is it scholars and students? Well, you're going to be writing in a slightly different way and organizing in a different way. Is it for general readers? From my area of American Indian Studies, a lot of books are written so that people can give back to their communities, and so it often is written in a different way. But you should have a clear sense of audience, partly because it's the right thing to have it. You're not writing for yourself, you're writing for readers, but also because publishers are going to ask you, who are you writing for? And you don't want to stand there slack-jawed and stare at them. Doesn't make a good impression on us. We'll be thinking that perhaps you're really not ready to be entering into the big leagues of publishers. How do you know when to make contact with a publisher? When you know what type of book is it going to be. Are you looking for a heavily designed picture book that is like a coffee table book? Are you looking for a straightforward scholarly book like a lot of the ones that you read? You need to be thinking about it, and don't take it for granted that the publisher will figure it out for you. No, you need to know ahead of time what your vision is of the work so you can have an intelligent conversation with us. Okay, so let's talk about what the main differences are between a dissertation and a publishable book. In other words, you need to rid your manuscript of the vestiges of a dissertation when you finally send it to us and we send it out for review. And we'll be looking for these signs. And if we find them, they're usually the death knell of what you have in your hands. So we'll want to remove those vestiges. Let's talk about what the differences are. The first difference between a dissertation, and this is generally speaking, and a publishable book is going to be the audience. Who, my friends, who's the audience for your dissertation? How many, can we, 3 people? Could it be 5? It's your doctoral committee, right? And that's the reason why most dissertations are unpublishable, because they're cobbled together from different people's vested interest in your work, and rarely does your singular voice come through. Now, there are notable exceptions of some doctoral committees that want their students to think about a book from the beginning. They stand out of the way and just nurture behind the scenes. But that's not usually the case. What usually happens with a dissertation is that it comes together, it's uneven, you see different people's voices and opinions in mind there, because your job as a doctoral student is to make them happy and to get your PhD, as I did at Virginia. But it really wasn't my work, I didn't own it. Well, the audience for a book should be the majority of people who attend one of the national conferences in your area of scholarship, such as the American Anthropological Association, where you have 5,000 people. Suddenly, the significance of what you're doing is going to shift dramatically, because your audience is going to go beyond people who immediately know your work. It'll be an audience of people who can find other types of relevance in your work. Now let's talk about that. The second difference between a dissertation and a book is significance. And this is generalized. Often dissertations tend to be more restricted, more focused case study, while a book needs to be a broader context of relevance for people in the field. Let me give you an example. A typical dissertation that I'll receive in American Indian Studies would be the history of an indigenous community in southern New England. Some publishers would just publish it for its own sake. However, think about this. How do you refocus and broaden these relevance of that particular case study so that people working in the Southwest or in Hawaii would be able to use your book in a valuable way and apply it to their own research? What kind of comparative theoretical models, what kind of comparative insights, what kind of methodologies can you use that could be employed by other people in your field? You see what I'm saying? The broader the relevance of what you're doing in a focused case study, the more likely a publisher is going to be interested, because it's going to have a broader impact on readership. Sometimes telling this tale of a community or telling a focused piece of research is justifiable means for getting it published. But you stand a better chance if you can broaden the relevance to more people in your discipline. Now, the third is really easy, and these are the things we look for all the time. The third important difference between a dissertation and a book is the forms of presentation. Number one, most dissertations have a chapter or a big section that's called Review of Scholarly Literature. Okay. Obviously, the reason for that is most of the time that the doctoral committee wants to be assured that you have done your research, that you know all of the ancestors who came before on your particular subject of inquiry. Isn't that nice for you? But it isn't needed in a manuscript for a book. We assume you already know that material. Think about reading a book where suddenly your narrative comes to a screeching halt and suddenly we have a recitation, a reciting of the ancestors, of all the people who came before who worked on your subject. It makes no sense, and it's a killer for people who are interested in reading your book for the sake of it being a strong narrative book. Don't do that. There's nothing wrong, of course, with critically engaging with all the people who are working in your field, but let those happen at select strategic intervals. Do not put them and pour them into a section all by themselves. It doesn't make sense. Bad, bad, bad. Killer. Death. Have I made that point really clear? I thought so. Okay. Next, another hallmark of a dissertation is that often you have what we call overly discursive notes. And here's what I did in my dissertation is that when I couldn't fit something into the main narrative, but I was darn proud of all that I had researched, I shoved it into notes. And those notes went on for epic pages of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. Remember, the longer the manuscript, the more expensive it is to make and the more expensive it is to buy. And so it's in everyone's interest to keep your materials as concise as possible. The evidence of overly discursive notes, where you just carry on another conversation in the notes, usually is seen as you being inexperienced, not having control over your narrative, et cetera, et cetera. Yes, there are books out there where you have some powerful arguments and notes, but for first-time authors, the publishers are going to be looking for you to keep your notes largely confined to the occasional qualification and documentation, of course. So just because you've got cool stuff doesn't mean you shove it into the notes and just sort of, and the notes become like a barnacle on the rest of your text. Bad thing to do, okay? I wrestled with a person working on a Blackfeet manuscript where he had 140 pages of text and 100 pages of notes. For the love of God, what do you do in a situation like that? Well, we spent about 4 months wrestling with it, and in the end, it's a stronger book, but he wasn't happy with the fact that I had intervened so much, but it was, as I said, it became a better book at the end. Another hallmark of a dissertation is often you have lots of appendices with primary documents. They can be tables, they can be interviews. They're usually not needed in a book. When you have got your dissertation done, people can access that for that information, but usually you don't store information for its own sake in an appendix in a book that much. You try to keep control over that as well. One of my favorites forms of a dissertation that is another sign of death is that dissertations usually have unnecessary telegraphing and summarizing. What do I mean by that? Well, most chapters of dissertations, as mine did, begin like this. In this chapter, I will say the following. And then the last paragraph of that chapter says, in this chapter, I just said this. And writ large, the whole manuscript is that way too. Your introduction is merely a summary of what's to come, and your conclusion summarizes what you already said. Folks, your readers are not stupid. You don't have to be so obvious about planting these little signposts for them along the way. They have memories, they will remember. I understand completely when you are writing for the first time, you will often want to write down for yourself what your chapter is about, but remember to remove it. It's clumsy, it's awkward, it's too obvious. You need a little bit more grace in being able to affect the transitions from one chapter to the next. Another sign of a dissertation is the fact that you bury the subject matter behind a scaffolding of theory and methodology rather than letting that theory and methodology emerge strategically at certain points in the narrative. Give an example. This same dissertation on the Indian community of southern New England, we didn't actually hear about Native peoples or their voices until page 140. Why? Because we spent a couple of chapters doing things about comparative perspectives theoretically on how to approach Native peoples, another chapter on a comparative perspectives on ecology, and eventually we got to the heart of the subject matter. Always, always understand it as a scholar. You are there to tell other people's other things, their stories, and share them with the world. You're not there for your own sake. And that means, even though the academy often thinks otherwise, what that means is you need to foreground real people's real lives, real experiences from the beginning. If you're dealing with individuals and communities and so on, show anecdotes at the beginning. Pull readers in. Let your theory, let your broader scholarly perspectives emerge at certain points in the narrative to illuminate the subject, but not to overwhelm or bury it. That's the mark of a sophisticated writer. That's the mark of somebody who should have a book published. Finally, the problem with the dissertations when it comes to form is, simply put, they're too gosh darn long, because it's the first time that most of you have ever tried to wrestle with a book-length manuscript and you have no filter, as I did. Time for confession, my dissertation at Virginia was 972 pages long. I'm absolutely proud of that to this day, that I was the first 2-volume anthropology dissertation there. Why? Because I couldn't shut up. I just kept going and going and going and going, and then I thought, okay, I've got a few more things to show, and going, and eventually it all ended. And of course, that was one of the last dissertations there ever typed on a typewriter. See, and I had to type it twice. And I still, as you can tell, haven't recovered from that ordeal. But that is an example of when we get when we as publishers get a long manuscript, we automatically are thinking, where can it be cut? That doesn't necessarily mean it has to be cut, but we're always looking for signs of rawness, of newness in you. So you really need to be taking a close look at unnecessary chapters and length and so on. Let's go on. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about when to make contact with a publisher, what those obvious differences are between a dissertation and a book. How do you find the right publisher for you? There's a 2-step simple equation that has to be done. And this is so obvious, but we never think of it because we just don't think in this way. The key to a successful publishing experience depends upon 2 things. One, finding a publisher who publishes in the area that you are writing about. It's not as obvious as you think. I get over 1,000 submissions a year. I automatically, and my colleagues do as well, I automatically reject 900 of them. Why? They're good manuscripts. It's because they're not on the areas that SUNY Press publishes on. So many academics blindly send stuff out. And so we're forced to turn it down, and it shows clearly that you are not informed about your choices as a publisher. So the key to a successful publishing experience is you look at your content and you match it up with the press that has an expertise, both editorially and marketing, in that area. The other key is finding a good editor to work with as a partner in this publishing process. We'll talk about both of those a little bit more in a minute. The main choice you will have in the academic world for publishers is a university press. There are other presses out there as well, and some of them are specialized in academic matters, but when it comes to tenure, most people are looking at university presses as being the way to legitimize scholarship. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not getting into here because that's a long discussion, but that's the way the world is, that's the way the game is played. Let me tell you a little bit about university presses, as this is probably your most logical choice, and that is there were over 130 university presses. The first university press was Johns Hopkins University Press, still around in Baltimore. It was founded in 1871, and there's a number of features of university presses that you should keep in mind. One is, this is not as obvious as you think, we're all part of universities. And that we have varying relationships with the universities, but we're all part of the academic world in our everyday life, not just in the books that we publish. And it varies. University of Washington Press is part of a campus. University of Nebraska Press, where I was director, is part of a single campus. SUNY Press, which I'm a director of now, answers to 64 campuses. We answer to all of the State University of New York system. Some presses are consortiums, some are not, but we're all tied in dance step to our universities. And we get varying amounts of financial support from them in order to help support scholarship. Another characteristic of university presses is that we're nonprofit. That means if you have a book that you think is going to make money, why are you talking to me? Because you make a lot more money from other people. If you're looking for an advance of $10,000, $25,000, if you feel you have a book that'll make you money, if you feel that the only way that you are making money is by freelance writing, don't go to a university press most of the time. Because we're here to support scholarship. We're not here to actually support your way of life. Sorry about that, but that's the way it is. You won't make very much money. Your main reward will be able to get tenure, to be able to get a job by publishing with us, particularly if you are first-time authors. Please keep that in mind. That allows me the freedom, unlike people who work at Simon & Schuster and so on, that when I listen to a project, I don't automatically have to think about sales in order to satisfy my investors. I can think of a book in terms of the quality of its content. Yes, we have to pay our bills, and often some books don't make money, they lose money. Others make a little more money, but it all balances out in the end. But we are largely concerned with disseminating knowledge because it is the right thing to do. And that's a nice privileged position to be in. Third characteristic of university presses, we each have areas of specialization. Those areas of specialization are called lists, L-I-S-T-S, lists. Back lists are all the books that were published in the past. Front lists are the new books. That means that when I go to a meeting, I'm not haphazardly grabbing anything that sounds like it's a cool idea. No, in fact, I acquire in certain areas, and I'm looking for books that match my goals. Each press has strengths. Nebraska Press, American Indian Studies was huge. SUNY Press, aside from certain areas that I'm doing now, is great in religious studies, philosophy, continental philosophy, Asian studies. It's your job to figure out what the lists are of each press and match them up with your areas of your own work. Each press has an advisory board. They're the ones who make the ultimate decision about scholarship. I can love a work that you do, but if it's a work of original scholarship, it ultimately has to go to our advisory board and be voted on. The advisory boards are usually made up of faculty and some administrators from the host university that supports the press. SUNY's case, we have 11 advisory board members. They come from the campuses across New York State. And every other month they meet and they vote on the projects that we present to them. We present to them the summary of the project, the reviews, the author's response to it, and then they vote. It's usually a thumbs up, a thumbs down on it when it comes to them. I've rewritten the charter of my board so that they can only make a recommendation to me, so I can ultimately make that decision myself. But most boards aren't that way. So one of the questions you need to be asking yourself, and you have the right to ask any acquisition editor, is, what is the proportion of projects that are turned down by your board every year? Sometimes it'll be zero. If a press is doing its job, it'll be in control of its own internal review process so much that only the cream of the crop gets to the board and the board trusts the press. Other times it may be that the board turns things down a third of the time. So keep in mind that behind all of your conversations with the press will be the advisory board if you're publishing works of original scholarship. And if you are taking a particularly controversial stand in your work of original scholarship, and one of the main people you're criticizing happens to be on advisory board of a press, I probably wouldn't publish with them. You'll probably be turned down. Sounds childish, but that's the way the world works, unfortunately. Some boards read manuscripts and have more editorial control. That's not a kind of board I want to have. I'd rather have the editorial control be in the hands of the people paid to do it, and that's the editors. Let's talk about editors. You're going to hear that word a lot with university presses. Let me tell you what the different types of editors are. Acquisition editors. Those are the people on the front lines. As their name says, they're here to acquire books. They're the people who have targeted goals every year and how many books they're supposed to acquire and publish. Not sales goals, but numbers of projects. Now, they're never going to tell you that, but here's the big secret. They need you as much as you need them. And they will never admit that, even when you torture them, but it's the absolute God's truth. Acquisition editors have to get a certain number of projects every year. They're the acquiring people on the front lines. These are the people that are responsible for acquiring books, which means that they will be part of you during your initial contact with the press. From the first conversation all the way through to when you send the final manuscript in, assuming it's been approved by the board and you're under contract. So they're responsible for ideas and content and for getting you on board in the first place, to reel you in. But then what happens is that after you send in your final manuscript, and you can follow along with that manuscript review process the manuscript process flow chart that I've given you. It's on two sides. Then your project will go to a managing editor. The managing editor is a person who's in charge of copy editing. Suddenly the focus for this editor shifts from the grand ideas of the book as a whole to line by line polishing and making as perfect as possible your prose, making sure your citations are consistent, and so on. When that's done, the project usually goes to the production department, where a production editor is assigned in order to oversee the typesetting of your book and the design of your book. Okay? So you get 3 editors at different stages in the process. But what you need to be most concerned about today and for getting signed up with the press is the acquisition editor. Occasionally you run into another type of editor, the series editor. Series editors do not work for presses as staff members. They're usually academics, professors, who have agreed to oversee a series and work with the press to find good manuscripts that conform to a certain theme or area of publication. Is that all really clear, or as clear as it's ever going to be? I'm seeing inspired looks in all your faces right now, so we're doing fine. Let's keep going. Again, ask questions. So, how do you find the right type of press for you? You know now what a university press is like. That's your main choice. And you know now you need to find the acquisition editor, maybe of not your dreams, but of your reality. Okay, what should you be looking for in a press? Number 1, you need to find a press that publishes in your area. I'm going to keep repeating that point because people forget. How do you do that? You need to do your research. And I've said this before, that when you're ready to publish, you need to research as much your publisher as you do certain parts of your own scholarship. How do you find which presses publish in which areas? There are many ways to gather that information, and the first one is, number 1, look on your bookshelf. What were the books that you have most used in your own research? Okay? Look at those books. Which of those books was published in the last 3 to 5 years? And who published them? We don't care about the author or the name of the book. You need to go right down to the bottom of the title page or the bottom of the spine to see which press decided to stake a claim in this area. Don't want to go back more than 5 years because often presses change their areas of focus. Stick with last 3 to 5 years. It's likely if you're using a book and it's really relevant for your research and this press has published maybe more than one type of book that you're using, that they're going to be interested in your work as well. That's one line of evidence. Second line of evidence are the conferences. Nothing better than this. What are the main academic conferences in your field? You may not be able to attend all of them, but which ones? Which publishers care enough to send all their books, editors, and usually marketing people there? Those are the people who have an investment in your area. Now, maybe you have such a general national conference that lots of publishers show up, but at least it's a place to start. And when you go to those conferences, when you look at those lists of conferences, suddenly you have in front of you one-stop shopping. You have a showcase in that exhibit of all the books that they consider to be really important and they're showing them off for you. And you should be able to grasp by walking into the exhibit or even talking to the people there what it is that are their main areas of focus. And that'll help you make a decision. Third way to gather information about what presses are right, which ones publish in which areas, go online to their websites. There's going to be a lot of glitz, or because people are going to be trying to sell books and showcase them, but their series will be there, the most recent books will be there, what they're showcasing will be there, as well as the contact information for their editors working in particular fields. Now, the clearinghouse for all university presses is an organization called the Association of American University Presses. Association of American University Presses. And that's at aaupnet.org. Let me repeat that. aaupnet.org. You go there and you get links to all the different university presses. Or you can just go to the presses' websites themselves. That gives you another line of information about which presses are publishing in which areas. Next, talk to people who have published with those presses. You obviously have a community of scholars and friends now as you're moving through the academic world. Who's publishing with which presses? That gives you a sense as well of the buzz, of the fitness of the editor, the goodness of the editor, the professionalism of the press, and so on. Gather all that information together, and here's what you're doing. You're starting to create a short list of publishers. Your short list should be 3 to 5 presses if possible. Now, you're all going to have your dream press. You always do. However, you need to have backups, and often that dream press might turn out to be a little bit of a nightmare when you start researching them a little bit more, or maybe that they turn you down. So it's best to come up with a short list of 3 to 5 presses. And as you make the short list, you will see the relationship to going on a date very much. We'll be drawing analogies in Match.com throughout the rest of this talk. As this is what happens, is eventually you'll be asked to submit a manuscript, and it'll be like going on a date and then being monogamous with that press. We'll continue with that. So you're creating a short list of projects. I'm sorry, a short list of publishers, 3 to 5. You now are researching which presses publish in your area. What else should you be looking for in a press? You should be looking for a press that publishes in a timely manner. There are presses who are very well known that when you send them a final manuscript, when it's already gone through the review process, take 2 to 3 years or 4 years to give you a book. The average turnaround time should be a year, 9 months to 14 months. Sometimes it's worth waiting to publish with what is perceived to be a prestigious press. It's worth waiting 2 to 3 to 4 years. And maybe your material isn't time dependent, but if it is, you need to consider whether or not you want to go to a press that has a faster turnaround time. So when you're talking to an editor, an acquisition editor at a press, you can ask them, what is your turnaround time for a normal length book? We're not talking a 4,000-page manuscript. We're talking a normal length scholarly book without too many illustrations. How much time does it take? And they should say about a year. If I get a manuscript that is ready to go in the copy editing and I get it in August, it should come out by late the next summer as a book in the best of all worlds, and you should expect that. There's so many sad cases of people who come into contract that I know of at pretty nice presses, and then 2 years later they're still waiting for their book to be published. If that's okay with you, great, but be aware that you should be at least going into it with your eyes open. All right? I'm not trying to make you afraid. I'm just saying to you, you need to gather that information before, I would say, you walk down the aisle and marry an editor and stay with a press. Know how long it's going to take. I would third be looking for in a press. We've talked about publishers in your area, timely turnaround to make a book. Also, number 3, what you should be looking for in a press is somebody who's conversant in multiple forms of publishing and dissemination. Someone who's conversant with online marketing and publishing. This is a very different world now in publishing, and it's not a bad world, it's an exciting world. There are conversations happening everywhere between scholars and disciplines online, and if you want to get the maximum word out about your book, you should have a publisher who understands what Facebook is about and Twitter and knows your listservs and is a presence on your listservs, and also will create electronic versions of your books out there, because you need to maximize the visibility. Where people in your profession are talking to each other, you would hope your publisher is there as well. Yet, there are still publishers at many national meetings who are scratching their heads and thinking, well, maybe that internet is something I should be looking into. If that's okay with you and you're happy with a very beautiful printed book only, rather than a beautiful printed book and online versions, electronic versions, go for it. But again, if the electronic publishing and marketing means something to you, ask those questions before you become committed to a press. You should also, fourth, be looking for a publisher whose review of your manuscript, the review process, is objective and timely and fair. And you can often gather that information by asking the editor about the timelines for reviewing manuscripts, as well as the experience of people who have had their project reviewed. Some presses go back to the same people to review their manuscripts again and again and again. What does that lead to, ultimately, in my view? It leads to a very boring look at certain types of fields because the same scholarship is going to be cranked out again and again. Some presses takes a year to 2 years to review a manuscript. That's not right. You should expect the review of a manuscript, if it's normal length, should be about 3 months. Sometimes it takes longer, but at 5 or 6 months, you have the right to talk to that press and say, hey, what's up? It's your work. You should have the right to ask them, and you should have the right to pull it. But you have that right to ask at the beginning, how long does a manuscript review process usually take? And they will estimate for you, because clearly we don't have control over reviewers' lives. They're academics with ups and downs of the semester and so on. And some of the best reviewers you got to wait in line for in order to get their attention. However, it should be about 3 months, and it should definitely not be more than 6 months unless there's real extenuating circumstances. And then last, you should be looking for an editor you can work with. What do you look for in an editor? You need someone who's knowledgeable about your area. Not only because they can give you advice and have an interesting, sophisticated, deep conversation with you about it, but because they're the main person, the acquisition editor, who will represent your work to all of the staff back at the publishing house. And if they don't get it, or if they're superficial in their knowledge, they're not going to be able to represent and sell your work to their colleagues as best as it needs to be done. They're not going to be able to represent your work to the advisory board. So you probably want an editor with some legs in the field. Doesn't have to be a PhD in the field, just means someone who is engaged with your work on a variety of levels. You want an editor who's professional and honest and open. You don't want an editor who's your best friend. Editors aren't your friends. They sometimes can become that, and sometimes they can be your drinking buddies. But generally speaking, what you want is an editor who will give you an honest evaluation of the work. And you have to be able to take that criticism and have a conversation with them. Editor is a partner who has a lot of expertise about how to take an idea and get it ready for a certain type of audience. You have to be willing to listen to that, and you need an editor who will not just say, this is a great work, man. No, you need someone who will tell you what's promising about the work, but what needs to be done to make it even better. If you want an editor who's going to be a rubber stamp, you will have a pretty crappy book at the end. And guess what, my friends? What happens when your book is published? It's cast in stone. You can't change it. And the rest of the reviews will be in a public forum where you will be humiliated every day of your life until you finally die. Do we all want that? You owe me beer. So, and that is the absolute truth. Remember this. The whole point of getting a good editor and a good review process is to improve a work before it can't be changed. And the right type of editor, if they like your work from the beginning, is going to be always looking at the promise and helping you realize that promise. Okay? Editors need to be willing to engage in conversations and listen to your point of view. It breaks my heart when I see some senior editors at some presses cross their arms when a young scholar comes up to them and just basically embarrasses them and says, we don't take first-time authors and so on. No, that's not an editor I'd want to work with. I want someone who's respectful of me as I will be of them. And that's something you have to judge by having a conversation at some point with them and getting a feel for it. And you can get a feel for it pretty quickly. I can tell you stories that I won't tell here about that. What are we looking for as editors when we go to meetings? We do have an agenda. Number one, we're looking for books that will satisfy our acquisition goals, both in terms of numbers, but also in terms of the areas that we publish in. I go to a meeting, I'm looking for certain types of books, and sometimes I talk to authors and make those books happen because no one's writing on them. But we're looking for that. When I'm having a conversation with you, I'm looking for books that match my own goals. I'm also looking for a book that's original, with a clear contribution to its subject. I've published over 500 books in American Indian Studies, and I yearn for originality. And you need to be thinking about that from the beginning. And I wish I could take a 2x4 to the heads of a lot of doctoral committees for allowing the same crap, to come out again and again and again. It's a waste of everyone's time. You don't need a 900th look at Joyce necessarily. What you need is something that stands out on its own. Are you revisiting an old subject with something incredibly fresh? Great. Are you offering primary documents in a way that have never been done before? Great. Are you revealing and sharing lives that have never been seen before that need to be told? Great. That'll make you stand out to a publisher. But if you're going back and visiting the same thing again and again and again, you're going to have trouble making your work stand out. We're looking for a book that is feasible as a publication. It breaks my heart when I invite a manuscript in, when I can tell it's full of promise, that I know that I can't publish it in a way which will allow me to reach its audience. I've got manuscripts that are 2,000 pages long, and I don't know what to do with them because they seem really interesting, but if I tried to publish it, it would cost about $200 per book. That means no one will be able to buy it who needs to buy it. Or I will get a manuscript that has 100 color pictures in the inside, and I have no way to publish that except to use expensive manufacturing techniques that will cost a lot of money. I need a book that's feasible as a publication for its audience. But last, I need an author I can work with. The big secret about publishing another one is that we all speak to each other. And that means we compare notes on people that are particularly difficult to work with. When you go to a conference and you see that exhibit hall, remember, there are real human beings in there that are usually left to themselves. And guess what? We all talk to each other. We go out to dinner afterwards. We'll have a few drinks. And if there are some of you who are particularly mean-spirited or small in their spirit, we will compare notes and you'll have trouble working with us. So I would encourage you, be thinking of this as a mutually respectful relationship. We all bring something to the table to make something that is very beautiful, a legacy, as I said, that exists beyond us. You bring content, hard work, ideas. We bring the rest in order to deliver it to the audience. We need to learn from each other and have conversations with each other, but need to be mutually respectful. I don't know how many times I've had someone who's afraid of me because I'm director guy and I'm the editor guy. And then when they sign a contract, they get really mean to my secretary or to my assistant or to my receptionist. That's small people, and we never work with them again. Why? Not because they have bad works, but because they're bad people. And I know a lot of acquisition editors feel the same way. Life's too short for us. So if you've been told throughout your life that perhaps you have trouble dealing with people, work on those skills before you come and talk to us. Because we have antenna up just like this. We know who you are. And if you slight one of us, the rest of the tribe, we'll go back in the back room and compare notes. I speak the truth. Okay. You have created a short list of 3 publishers, maybe 5 publishers, and you're getting kind of excited about it. You know, you've got your contact information of the editors. Things are looking good. Now you're thinking, how do I reach out to these foreign creatures, these publishers? How do I make those contacts happen? Let me tell you all the bad things to do first because they're more fun to talk about. Then we'll talk about the good things. The bad thing, first of all, is to send us, without any invitation, a whole manuscript. I'll just drop the monster into a box and send it off to Gary because I'm sure he'll want to look at my work. He doesn't know me, but I'm sure he'll want to open it up and look at it. I will put that in the recycling bin just like that, and so will anybody else. Do never send an unsolicited whole manuscript. Matter of fact, whenever you're near a publisher, don't have the manuscript in your hands because it will scare us off. Okay, when we want to see it, we will invite it. Until then, we will speak through actual conversation, through an email cover letter, or through a proposal. But only when we feel like we have an investment in you will we take the time to read a whole manuscript. Never send it without invitation. That is a bad thing. Secondly, if you meet an editor in person, do not bring the manuscript with you and be shaking and quivering and opening every page and reading it to us. Aside from the fact that we will become quickly afraid of you as a human being, the minute you leave, I will put it in the trash, or my friends or colleagues will put it in the trash because we're not going to want to carry it back from a conference because it's too darn heavy to put in our luggage. So leave the manuscript at home. For the love of God, keep away from it. Distance yourself from it until we invite it. So that's a very bad thing to do. The second bad thing to do is to call us on the telephone without invitation. Not because we don't want to speak to you at some point, but we're not going to be able to give you our full attention because we're very busy. As I said, I'm dealing right now with over 200 projects myself that will be published from this year, from next year, 2010, up to 2015. And if you call me in the middle of the day and I don't know who you are and you have to spend the time telling me about this new project, I won't be giving you the full attention that you deserve. Okay, you need to ramp up. We need to gradually approach that point in our relationship in which I want to have a conversation with you on the phone, but that is not the point. Let me give you an example of a classic problem that occurred one day. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Nebraska Press, and I was kind of winding things down, and I get a phone call. And a woman introduced herself and said she is from Montana, one of your next-door neighbors almost. And she said, Gary, I've got a great American Indian project to tell you about. And I said, great, what is it? See, asking the right question, what is it? The line went dead. The line went dead. And I said, okay, I need to get back to work. I didn't know who this person was, and I didn't have caller ID at that point in Nebraska, and so I just hung up the phone. Went back to work, and at 4:22, I pick up the phone to make another call, and I hear her voice on the line. This person had been talking for 22 minutes without me responding and was still talking about her project. How, my friends, is that humanly possible? Can any one of us talk for 22 minutes without some sort of guttural response from someone else on the other end of the line? I do not know, but as you can see, I clearly didn't give her my time of day. And what was ironic was when I picked up the phone, what the first words I heard from her were, well, Gary, what do you think of my book? I know you're all thinking, you're hoping that the end of the story will be that I was a sucker and I published that book. Well, the fact is that it was a great book. It was an excellent book. Went through the review process. We took it to our board. The board said yes. And then the author decided that she would not make the revisions that was necessary, even though she had agreed to it. And so we parted ways, and she found another press. So that's the end of that story. Yeah, it was okay. Yep, we'll be talking about that in a minute. The question you asked, and I'm repeating this for the camera, see, I remembered, was at what point can you pull a manuscript from the process? We'll go through that step by step in a minute, but it's the great question to ask is when you're allowed to do that, and I'll get right to it. Any other questions before I continue with this exciting narrative? Yes? Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're asking what happens when you've got an initial interest, expression of interest, you follow through, and then it goes into a black hole. And that, well, we'll talk a little more about that in a second, but my quick answer is they're sending you a clear message they're not interested. If they were courteous, they would say no. Some of them just move on in their lives and forget about you. So assume it's a no. Okay, what are the best ways to contact the press? Okay, there's a couple of really good ways. One of them, and this is my favorite way, but it doesn't mean it's the only way, is that you send them by email or by mail a cover letter. Now, what you want to do is you want to go to the press's website, and it usually says what they prefer. Sometimes they prefer mail. Most of the time it's email, and they usually prefer a cover letter. So let's look at that cover letter, okay? I've given you here, holding up for the camera, cover letter. Both sides, it says how to write a cover letter. I used to include lots of examples of bad cover letters, but the stack got too thick to bring to the meeting, so I'm not going to do that anymore. But I want to go through briefly this cover letter and how you do a cover letter. The reason is because what is contained in the information you're providing in a cover letter is often the same sorts of information you need to share if instead you have a conversation with the editor for the first time. So pay attention, please. First, cover letter, and it may come by email or mail. Most of the time it's email for me now. And this is your initial foray into the world usually. Address it to the correct editor at the press. So many people say, dear editor, or dear director, or dear SUNY press. It shows you haven't done your research. You should know the right contact person. If you don't, call the press and say, I'm interested in sending in a cover letter, and who should I address it to? Okay? And again, it makes sure it gets to the right email address. It makes sure that it gets to the right mailbox. But otherwise, it'll get cast into a general pile from hell that may never see the light of day. Again, I know, I've seen many of those piles myself. Okay, also make sure that you address it to the right press. A lot of you are going to be cranking these out one after another, even for a short list. How many times have I gotten a letter that says, Gary Dunham, editor at Stanford Press, Syracuse Press? And I wonder, is this supposed to be a Syracuse or Stanford submission, or is it for me? I don't know. But it doesn't make me feel so good about you. And you want to make a good impression at first time. Remember, it's our first coffee together, but we've decided to meet. Second, keep it concise and short. You're not here to impress me. You're here to give me information about your work so that I can make a decision of whether I want to pursue a relationship with you. I want facts. I don't want you to impress me. I'm not your doctoral committee. I need descriptive information about what it is, why it matters, and so on. Third, and I strongly recommend this, and it's not kissing ass, and that is, if you have some type of insider connection to the press or prior connection to me or the press, tell me about it right away. If we met at a conference and I said, why don't you send me a proposal or a cover letter about that? I'm intrigued. Or we met at a dinner party and you said that. Or one of your authors is one of my authors. Or one of my series editors recommends you. Tell me that, because it helps me remember you and it helps me tie you into something that I will probably think very highly of. It's not a bad thing to do. It's a good mnemonic for me. Then you want to immediately talk about your project. Don't ramp up to it. Do not talk about your years of struggle writing it. I don't care about that. Okay? We'll save that for another time when we're all crying together after a beer or two, okay? But really, I get too many people who tell me about their years of turmoil and struggle. I know you probably feel that inside, but it's just too much information being shared. I don't need to hear that. I need to know about your project because I'm looking at a lot of these every day, and I'm diving in, quickly looking, making an assessment about your project, and then moving on. So get to the point. Tell me the name of your project. You're going to have a working title. It'll probably change before it becomes a book, but you have a working name. Tell me what that is so that it helps hook and make real what this work is. Secondly, what is the work about? Tell me then, is it a proposal or a complete manuscript? Tell me what the status is of the work. I don't know how many times someone has said to me, Gary, I have a manuscript ready for review. And they describe it to me, and I say, I'd love to see it. And then they come back and say, I've got another 4 months and I'm still working on it. You want a good faith relationship from the beginning, so please say at what stage you're at with the work, because we're going to find out. And if it's a revised dissertation, we will find out. So don't hide it, because the first question will be, is this a revised dissertation? Or we'll look at your CV and we'll figure it out. So just tell us. Don't try to hide it. And those people in your doctoral committee that say don't mention it, that's a revised dissertation, they're fools, because we'll find out. So tell us from the beginning. Tell me the relevant format specifications of the work. How long is your manuscript going to be or is? If you've got a lot of illustrations, that's the sort of thing we need to hear. And then down here, subvention money. Some of your research may have money for publication that comes with it. If you have a book that's expensive to make, like a heavily designed book, tell us about it. We're not for sale. That's not going to influence us when it comes to our editorial board, but it will help us better figure out whether we can actually feasibly publish your work. Let's turn the page. Then tell me about your project and its importance and its audience. I'm not here to be impressed. I want you simply to tell me about your project. How would it contribute to scholarship? Be realistic about your audience. It's not Oprah, okay? Much as some of you are kind of feeling that way. It won't be. Don't even go there with it. And don't think the New York Times Book Review will be the home for most of you, because it's not supposed to be. That's for other types of books. And then I would say this really helps to sell your work. Look at number 6. Say briefly why the press is the right one for your work. Is it because we have a track record in the field? Is there a series that you like? Do you like the way that we experiment with multiple forms of publication? Tell us. We like to be flattered, yeah. But more importantly, we like to know that you're engaged seriously with us as a potential partner. We like that part of it. Lastly, and finally and simply, just tell me who you are. Say a few sentences about yourself, and guess what? Put your contact information in, because some people don't. Now, for emails, it's not that difficult. I can hit reply and say, like to talk to you, but who are you? So make sure you have the contact information in there as well. Any questions about the cover letter? This is what a conversation is. Okay? So let's say you're not going to make your initial inquiry into the alien world of publishing by writing. You're going to do it in person, and in some ways, this is so much better. And that is, you go to a conference, and you know ahead of time which publishers are going to be there, because they listed usually on the conference webpage. At that point, email the acquisition editor who will be there and ask to set up an appointment to talk to them about your project. Usually they'll give you 15 minutes or half an hour at the most, usually 15 minutes. And don't be offended if when you get to the booth, you have to wait a little bit, because often there are walk-ins, and sometimes those people who come into the booth are very senior, important people, and you can't just push them aside. So you've got to wait your turn, but you will almost always get the slot that you were promised, and you get a chance to talk to people. My real recommendation to you is, if you've never done this before, number one, it's understandable to be nervous. I'd be terrified. I never did this. I don't think I could have done it when I finished my dissertation. So practice with people that you care about, who will give you advice. Practice with them about presenting what your project is and why it matters. Because you're going to go up there, shake hands, introduce yourself, and then you need to say, hi, blah, 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 I am working on this. And this is why I think this is an important contribution to scholarship. Be ready for all the talking points, and to be very calm, look people in the eyes and discuss it. Do not bring your dissertation or your manuscript to the booth, again, because you will be tempted to open it up and start sharing it, and we don't want that. We don't want to carry it home with us. But this will also give you a chance to gauge the person on the other end, of the publishing end. If you have a conversation with us, whether you find them trustworthy, whether they're answering your questions, it gives you a chance to follow up about the review process, the turnaround time, the editorial board, all these things. It's not a bad thing to do, to meet with people in person. Okay, you've made your first contact. And let's say there's been 5 presses. And you're feeling pretty good. You know, you did a couple of emails, you met with 3 people at one conference, and you've got your own impressions, but you're waiting to see what they do. And here's what's going to happen. With a cover letter or with a conversation, they may ask for a proposal, not the whole manuscript, but a proposal, because they want to see a little bit more. Now, a proposal is a cover letter, usually with an annotated table of contents and a couple of chapter samples. Me, that's a waste of time, because if I've seen a cover letter, or if I had a conversation with someone and I know the length of the manuscript, I'm just going to go dig in and ask for the whole manuscript right away. Most of the time, what's going to happen is that you're going to get either an outright rejection or some sort of black hole response, or you will get an invitation to submit your manuscript. That is the key point in this relationship, my friends, when you have to go monogamous. You can send your proposal, your cover letter, your conversations with as many presses as you want, But when it comes to sending your manuscript out to a press, it's one at a time. That is the general rule, particularly for first-time authors. There will be some senior scholars that will say to you, send it to a bunch of people. You do that, we compare notes, we're spending a lot of money reading your manuscript in-house, sending it out for review, we will get you bad. We'll blacklist you, both of us, all of the presses involved, will probably just not ever want to work with you again because you have not been upfront with us or good with us. If you have a hot project and two presses knowingly are competing with each other for that, that's for your project. Good for you, that's unusual, but you want to make sure that everyone is informed about the fact that you are working with more than one press at one time. Think about this. You send me a project and you decide to go behind my back and see another press. We will usually, the other press and myself, ask the same people to review your manuscript. There's nothing like calling up a person to review a manuscript and we find out that he's already reading it for another press. That means you haven't been honest with me, and that means there's no partnership possible, and you will go away and burn in the fires of hell for all publishers. I remember a time that a person did this, and I was at Nebraska Press, and had a fine work on the termination era in American Indian history, and accidentally sent me an email with all the names of the other editors he was working with at the same time, 7 other editors. He had sent the same manuscript to 8 presses, and we were all sending it out for review at the same time. So we scheduled a conference call, we 8 presses, and we simply said we would never work with you again. We sent him a joint letter. You have to be good faith with us as we will be with you. We want some assurance that if we go through the review process with you, and all that money and all that time it's spent, that's a lot of time and money, that at the end of the day, if we offer you a contract, if it's a fair contract, that you will work with us. Yes? A cover letter. What? A cover letter. Or a proposal, right? So you're asking what kind of a turnaround time should you expect? Okay, the question is, what kind of turnaround time should one expect when one sends a cover letter or a proposal to a press? Usually 2 weeks to a month. It doesn't take long to read an email. And people should hit reply and reply to you pretty quickly. Sometimes it gets a little more complicated if it's a junior acquisition editor who may have to get a little more permission from a senior person before they can ask for the whole manuscript. But usually it's 2 weeks to a month. Mm-hmm. That's the review process, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, she was asking about the review process, and we'll get into that in a minute. Always a lot of questions at this juncture. Yes, I'll get to you in a minute, sir. Yep. Yep. Okay, the question of etiquette is, you've got more than one press interested, but you know you need to send it to one. What do you say to the others? What you say to the others is, and you name the press. Don't say another press. It's just stupid. We all know each other. Just say this press is interested. I'm going to send it to them, but I'd like to keep you in mind because I really like your press. And, you know, most of us are grown-ups, and we're not going to get that miffed about it. You know, we play the game both ways. And that's how you do it. You keep it really open that way. And, sir, you had a question. Mm-hmm. No, not at all. Sometimes what happens is somebody's ill or on vacation. If you don't, the question is what happens if a month has gone by and you've sent a cover letter or proposal in and you've got no response. I would follow up with another email and see if you get a response. And if you don't, it goes away. And one more question, yes. Well, the question is, do I have tips about an edited volume? One, find a press that not only publishes in your area, but is receptive to edited volumes. I love edited volumes. I think that they can add, they can do justice to a complicated subject where multivocality is needed. I think there could be a quicker turnaround time on them. And I think from a revenue point of view, one can sell the chapters individually as much as you can sell the whole volume. It's like a journal. Some presses don't feel that way, and that's a question you need to have from the beginning with them. But be prepared, if you talk about an edited volume, to have that annotated table of contents ready to be able to show the press that you as an editor have strong control over the contributors to that volume, and you're willing to kick some to the curb if they're not as good as the others. And that's tough the first time around because some of them are your friends. So those are the qualifications I would say for edited volumes. Okay, so the time has come. You've had 3 presses who just are hungry. They're gnashing their teeth. They want your work. And you decide to send it to one. Okay. The other 2, you inform clearly that you're going to be sending it to this press. You send it in. You should be getting, the first thing that happens when you send it to us is that we will look at it in-house, usually for a month to 6 weeks. It'll be myself and my assistant. And we'll be looking for the following. Is it right for our list? Well, if it isn't by now, then we're not doing our job. Secondly, is it feasible as a publication? Did you really mean it when you said it's 300 pages long and not 1,000 pages long? Yes, good. And fourth, is it ready to be sent to outside peer reviewers? At SUNY Press, and most presses would agree with me, when we send it out for review, we're not looking for them to make the decisions for us. We're looking for them to identify strengths and weaknesses of a work that we think has promise. And we want to give it the best chance. And so at that juncture, I will sometimes go back to the author and say, I love what you're doing, but you're going to get shot down by reviewers, or you're not going to get the most positive reaction because of this. And I recommend that you revise and resubmit to me. You have the right to pull it at that point. It's your right, it's your work. If you don't want to revise and resubmit, or if you think it's going to take too long, and you've got other presses who really still want to work with you, and you think you could slide it through easier, fine. But generally, my advice is going to be echoed somewhere else. So you might want to think about following it. But it's your right to pull it. Let's assume you've either revised and resubmitted and we're really liking it, or the first time around, it's pretty good shape. We'll send it out for review. Most reviews in the university press world are simultaneously to 2 reviewers at the same time. Unlike journals, it's not double blind. They know who you are. But unless they send really good reviews back, you won't know who they are. And we're not supposed to ever review who they are. That's one of those oaths, those sacred oaths that we take as publishers. I still have people from 14 years ago trying to tell me who the reviewers were of their book. It just never ends, the madness. And you would normally, in most fields, figure out who it is anyway, particularly if the reviewer is irritated because you didn't refer to his or her work. Then you can kind of figure it out. Or they recommend for additional reading all these books by a certain author that happens to be their name. That happens sometimes too. But you send it out for review, and we have a standard report form that we send out, and we give them an honorarium of a few free books and usually $100 to $200 worth of cash. It's not much, but that's what everyone plays with in this field. And that process usually takes about 3 months, and as I said, sometimes 6 months. After 4 to 5 months, drop the editor an email and ask for an update and see how that's working. Okay? Assuming you're getting your response back in a timely manner, I wouldn't pull it until you get your reviews back. I usually prefer to get both reviews back along with my own take on it before I share it with the author. Why? Because I don't want to do it in a sequential way. I want them to see the whole universe of response to their work at the same time because it helps shape a singular path for revision. That's how I do it. Some presses don't. They throw out the reviews as soon as they come back. And so sometimes you get a great one and you get excited and kind of cocky, and then you get one that's not so good, and then you're going, oh God, now where do I stand? I prefer just to share it all at the same time. I think it's more holistic and fair to do it that way. So what happens? The reviews come in. Bum, 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 bum. What's going to happen next? What happens next could be in one of many paths. One is it could just be seen as an outright rejection. They just don't think that this is original or you really don't have it together. Now, that's rare. If you've got a good acquisition editor who's got a sense of things, that's not going to happen because it's rarely ever with an experienced editor do you get outright rejection if they have done their in-house screening. If that's the case, however, you have no choice. You have to pull it. You go with another press. Plenty of books have been published that have been rejected by several presses at the same time. Don't take it personally, but remember this. You're playing the game, you have to follow the rules, okay? You got to be ready to accept criticism. And if two people are seeing it negatively who don't even know each other, chances are there's something that's got to be fixed about your work. And so be humble, and even if you have to go elsewhere, don't be pointing fingers necessarily at the press. Be looking at your own work and figuring out how to make it better before, as I said, it's cast in stone as a book. That's the first one, and that's the most negative, and that rarely happens for most presses. What often happens is that you will get a real positive report that says, this is almost ready to go, it's really good, but it's got a few changes. And then someone who says, it's good, but it's got a lot more that has to be done to it. And then you will want the acquisition editor to come in and say, okay, this is what needs to be done. Or it could be two reviews that both say, good, but it needs a lot more work. That's entirely happens all the time, particularly with a revised dissertation. And at that point, what we will do is say, we want a response from you on how you will revise. Sometimes we'll offer you an advance contract on the spot because we still think it's promising. We want to reel you in, but usually we'll tell you, revise it and send it back to us, right? Because we can't go forth to our board if it's still a lot of work to be done. You have the right to pull it at that point. You can say, I don't agree with you. I'm going to go to another press. And that's fine. Keep it good-natured as much as you can and move on. The other possibility is that you get very positive reports, which is nice, and we take it to the board. What we will ask for is a written response to the reviews. You tell us, okay, I'm going to fix my manuscript in this way, and I'm going to do it by this point. We will take your response, the reviews, we'll take your CV, we'll take a summary that we'll write of the project, we'll take it to our board, and ask for permission to publish your work. And if we've done our job, the board is simply going to say yes. If they say no, there's no appeals, it goes away. But if you've done your work, you've got the right press, it's going to happen. Let's assume the board approves it. What happens next? What do you think happens next after the board approves? What's the next step? Contract. We have to enter into a legal agreement. So we all of we nonprofit presses have standard author forms that we'll tailor a little bit for the particulars of the circumstance. But for first-time authors, there's only going to be certain things that you will be getting out of it, generally speaking. Okay, I send you the contract. What do? Do you sign it? You read it first. Do you know how many people do not read their publishing contracts? It's a legal agreement, folks. I don't know how many people, they get mad at me about royalties when I say, well, didn't you willingly went into this. You're walking through the valley of the shadow of death. I mean, you've decided you wanted to walk with us. What's the problem? You want to read it. If you want to consult a lawyer, fine, that's your right. It's a legal agreement. But there are going to be certain things about a contract. What a publishing contract does, essentially, is it takes your rights to the work and you assign it to the press to manage the book for you. That's as simple as that. Your rights. You own the work up to the point when you sign a contract, and then suddenly you don't own the book anymore. You've given it to the press, and the press manages it for you. That's essentially what a contract does. That makes sense because a press is the one who's going to be managing the publishing process for you. We're your partner on this end of the process. You took all those years providing the content, and from all these years henceforth, we're going to manage it and take care of it for you. But it's also scary because you're basically saying goodbye to your complete control over your own work. And you're not a Stephen King. You're not going to be able to insist on too many things at this juncture. So now some of you might say, well, I'm going to insist on owning the copyright to my work. Therefore, I'll retain some control. Doesn't work that way. When you turn to the Library of Congress page near the beginning of a book, it's on the left side, you'll see copyright in the name of. It's all symbolic. It doesn't make a difference. I have plenty of authors who have copyright in their name, but they've given the rights to the book to me. So they effectively, while it looks nice, they don't own the rights to the book. So don't be deceived by copyright. Copyright doesn't mean anything. It's rights that mean something. Let's talk a little bit about it. Contract spells out how much money you get. For most of you, it'll be hardly anything. And for most of the presses, we'll get our money back that we spent making your book happen. But you need to look at the royalties and understand that there are two different types of royalties. There are what we call the list royalties, L-I-S-T. Those are what the Dean Koontzes and the Stephen Kings get. That's a percentage off of the selling price of the book. So if you have a 10% list royalty and your book costs 20 bucks, you will get $2 for every book sold. You won't get that with most presses. You will get what is called net royalties, N-E-T, N-E-T, net royalties. That's the percentage after all the costs of shipping and the discount to sell it to the bookstores is applied. So a $20 book with a 10% net royalty, subtract 40% of the $20 because that's what Barnes & Noble requires, and then subtract shipping. Say there's $8 left, you get 10% of $8, you get 80 cents. That's as simple as it is. You will get net royalties as a first-time author with a university press. I wouldn't argue much about royalties for a university press simply because why bother? You're not going to get much out of it. If it's your second, third, or fourth book, if it's a textbook, yes, talk about the money a little more. First time through, your choice, but I would probably stay away from it. It also, the contract spells out what are called subsidiary rights. This is important, subsidiary rights. That's all the revenue that comes from your book that's not made from selling it. That is, if people want to use a chapter out of your book for course packets, the press manages it for you and splits the revenue with you. If we can sell a translation of your book to France or to Egypt or whatever, the press will make some money off of that transaction and will split the money with you in a certain way. If a book club is interested, that's a subsidiary right. Movie rights, play rights, first serial rights, all these things. That's additional monies that come other than from the selling of the book itself. Here's the one thing you need to insist upon with your publisher. It's what's called the reversion of rights clause. Reversion of rights. A lot of book contracts or university presses don't have any way for you to ever get your book back. That's not right. SUNY Press was like that. When I got there, I read their contract, for the standard contract for authors. It's 14 pages long, and Nebraska Presses was 4 pages long, and they said the same thing. It's just that we have lawyers in New York that decided to get involved with the contract. Well, I took a look at it, and I realized that when an author signs a SUNY Press, there's no way to ever get their book back. There's no way for ever the rights to transfer back. But what you need to insist upon is a reversion of rights clause. And what normally a reversion of rights clause is that it specifies that when the book goes out of print, you have the right to request in writing to get the book back, get the rights of the book back to you. What's wrong with what I just said? How do you define out of print nowadays in the age of digital technology? I can have a book in a cyber file selling it forever. You're never going to see it, and I can hold on to it forever by that definition of out of print, right? You don't need books in a warehouse anymore for it still to remain in print. What you need to insist upon is the following. Your rights are reverted to you if the sales fall below a certain amount every year. It's the sales number. It should be a threshold, not a categorization of in print or out of print. Usually it's 25 books a year or 50 books a year. If it falls below that, you would have the right to get your book back if you want it. You may not want it. You may have moved on to 4 or 5 other books. All right? Another thing to watch out for is some presses put a clause in that gives them the right to exclusively look at your second book. That has been challenged in court many times. I personally think it's unethical. If you come back to my press, it's because I've won you back, not because I'm forcing you back. But I would be looking carefully to see if that clause is in there. Your contract will also state a submission date when you must send that manuscript to the press. You need to follow that. This isn't graduate school anymore. You can't get an extension necessarily. If you feel like you need an extension, make sure you contact in writing your editor well ahead of time and get that extension. If they're going to ask you, when can you send me the final manuscript, and they send you a contract, give plenty of buffer time for yourself. It's really going to mean saving your own life. I love that music. Thank you. Another thing you will see in contracts is that all contracts will say you are responsible for paying permissions on images and illustrations, as it should. Now, if you wanted to negotiate that, have a couple books under your belt. But most of the time, you're responsible for paying not only for the actual image itself, which can cost money from an archive, but paying the permission for it. That keeps down the number of illustrations in books and keeps the book cheaper when you put that provision on somebody. You're also responsible for your own index. Some of you want that control and some of you don't. If you want to pay to have someone do it, it'll be about $3 per page, which could be $1,000 of your money. You probably want to do it yourself. Okay? We're almost done. The contract is signed. You took a wild weekend off from your life to celebrate with your friends. You went in the mountains. We couldn't see you for 5 days. You came back. Maybe you have a sore head now, but you're happier. And now you ask yourselves, is my work done? Gary, is my work done? And can I celebrate the fact that the book is going to be published? And I will say to you, alas, dear one, it is not quite done yet because you have some final things to do. And this is where the delays always occur, because authors often think that when they've got through the board and they get a contract, that they don't have to work on their work much anymore. It's not true. You have a deadline to meet, you have stuff you have to get in order, and you need to get that back to us in time, that manuscript. Number one, get your revisions done. We will look when they come in to make sure they're revised. We're the gatekeepers. If we let it slide through, then we'll never be able to catch it afterwards. Number two, way ahead of time, get in writing the permission to use your images. It takes time, so get on it. Third, get your illustrations in order as soon as you can. Make sure they're clean and send everything in with the manuscript, the illustrations, the permissions, as well as the manuscript itself. Your manuscript will have to be formatted according to the press's specifications. And they'll usually be 12-point Courier double-spaced. All right? If you don't do that, if I get a manuscript and it has 4 illustrations and they're missing, it'll sit on my shelf until I get them. If I get a manuscript and the 4 illustrations come in and I don't have permission to use those illustrations, it sits on my shelf until I have the right to publish the whole work. So it's in your interest to get it done. Comes into me, my assistant and myself, we go through a checklist to make sure it's ready, then we move it into copy editing. And at that point, we wave goodbye maybe forever. It goes on. You'll see me at conferences. I will be there for you when you have your book signing or when the book is unveiled at a conference, but you'll be working with the rest of my staff. The person doing the copy editing, then they'll be typesetting it, as I mentioned before. You get to look at the page proofs, and then it'll become a book. While that's happening, our marketing department will be putting together a marketing plan for you, showing you where we're going to send it to review media, where we're going to be sending it to the conferences, and so you have all that information. Now, a few final points I'll make. One is the title of your work. The press, ultimately, according to publishing, the custom of publishers is to let the press have the right to create whatever name for your book they want to. Now, that's arbitrary, and that usually doesn't happen. But keep in mind that sometimes what happens is when a manuscript goes into copy editing, that the title will change somewhat. And why is that? That's because that's the first time that anybody other than the acquisition editor has really seen your work, and that'll be the marketing people, the sales people, the development people, the production people. They will weigh in and come up with what they consider to be the best title. Usually, it's going to be what you've all agreed upon with your acquisition editor, but be aware that it could be some changes, and maybe for more of a focus, to get better attention in the marketplace, whatever. At least you'll have a conversation with your editor about that if there are changes. In terms of the look of the book, in terms of the cover design, my recommendation to you is this, is that most presses like SUNY will allow you to give feedback on your cover, but ultimately we decide what your cover is going to look like. That's just the way it is. You're not a Stephen King yet, and we need to get our work done and keep going with other books. But what I recommend is that you have an open conversation with your editor about your ideas for a cover. You might have 3 great images that are perfect for your book. Send multiple ideas so you're not wedded to one. Send them to your editor. Your editor will do a good job of presenting it to the press. They'll come up with something. They'll send back to you a PDF of what it looks like as a mock-up, and then we can all move forward together. You're all, over the years as you work on your manuscript, are going to be wedded in your brains, your sleep, your dreams, to one title and one look for the book that may be inspired and it may be too rigid. And so remember, you're partnering with professionals that are going to be the first real outsiders to look at your work Allow us to have feedback in that process. That's all I got to say, but we have questions. Excellent question is, would you be responsible for permission of the cover? No, the press is responsible for the permission of the cover. If you have good leads, like often when I'm working with an indigenous community, an artist will be recommended to me by the author from that community, I will follow up and my staff will. Other questions? We're at the end of this long road together. You must have more questions. I can feel it, but you're going to hate yourself later if you don't ask them now, because I'm flying back to Albany. And that's a long ways away. Questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The whole point of copy editing is to make it better, and I don't mean to rewrite. If you're talking about a fiction work, that's another whole conversation you need to have with an editor to make sure you safeguard your voice. But the whole point of copy editing, the question was how much is your words going to be changed when it goes through copy editing? And if you have a good copy editor, they have a light touch. But you do want them to keep your voice, but also to make it as clear as possible. So it's clarity more than anything that is looked for in copy editing. And you will see in most contracts there will be a clause that says the press has the right to edit for clarity and for consistency and for conformity to standard scholarly usage. Okay? Question? Yes. Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. Tick, 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 tick. Mm-hmm. Oh, I do. I do. I can't answer that for you because I don't know the details, and it wouldn't be good for me to counsel you on too much of that, but I will say this, that if you decide that you want to go back and revisit and broaden your number of publishers, you can't leave these people dangling. It's not appropriate. You need to tell them what you're doing. It doesn't mean that necessarily they're going to turn you down, but you could simply state, I'm going to be I'm waiting to hear from other publishers, and I'll be back to you in about a couple of months and see what they say. But do not leave them dangling. It all depends on what your objectives are. If you're looking for tenure and you're worried about the perception of a small publisher for your first book, that's a real consideration. Okay, but it's just open, honest communication with the publisher to be fair to them as you would want them to be with you. Other questions? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what are you asking? You're asking about on-demand. Everyone does on-demand, but you're talking about a vanity press where you have to either pay, yeah, or self-publishing. That is totally your choice. You're the free to publish with whomever you want. I will say to you from my experience that if you are looking for a tenure committee or someone hiring you in an academic position, they're going to be looking more favorably on you publishing with a press that has review procedures and is recognized as experts in the area of scholarship. It depends on what your goals are. Self-publishing can give you, it can be more immediate. It can give you control over the design of your book. That's wonderful. But it often means that you're limited in the people recognizing that it's a credible work, particularly a work of scholarship, and you're not going to have the marketing resources of a publisher if you're doing it all yourself. But if your goal is to publish for your family, your friends, or your community, self-publishing works well. My mom has self-published 3 books, and they're books for the family and about the family, and she wouldn't want to go anywhere else. She wants control over her work. Okay? It depends on the goals that you have. But there's choices for everyone. Questions? And I thought I was about ready to make my final words. Yes, hold on for 1 second. You have a question, sir? Okay. It's not a book yet. It's a manuscript. No, I'm just saying make sure you say that to them as a manuscript. Otherwise, they think you're presumptuous. Well, no, it's not vague. It's actually pivotal because they're doing a job. The question that's asked is, you have a work that has been, it's not been accepted, but they want to look at the whole manuscript, right? Yeah. You've had favorable reviews, but before they go to the contract stage, they want to see evidence that you're going to be altering it in a way which pulls it away from its original focus. Okay, to an American audience, all right. And you're wondering, what should I do? Well, there's a variety of ways of looking at it. One is they're doing their job, perhaps, right? They know their audience. They know the strengths they can play to as a press. And so they're doing the right thing by, they engage deeply with your work, and they're offering you a blueprint for reaching the right sort of audience. What's your comfort in that? What's your comfort zone? How do you feel? I mean, you're engaging with professionals who are looking at a certain point of view. Another press with another type of emphasis and strength might advise you differently. What do you want? And there's no right or wrong answer. I've seen this happen so many times. They're doing right by saying that they can play to a certain audience. You have to decide whether or not you can live with their reaction and your revision. I wish I could say yes or no, but there isn't. They did their job. And it should be to your credit and their credit that this conversation is so engaging with your work and that they're still interested in talking to you about it. It's a compliment. That didn't help you at all, did it? That is, yeah. Or you could have 3 beers and ask yourself the same question again. Maybe you'll have more enlightenment. I don't know. It works with some authors. But really, I mean, you see what they're doing is that they're trying to match up their lists and their strengths more to your work. If your work is morphing beyond what you're comfortable with, you know. And you had a question. Excuse me. It'll rarely happen that you go to a university press of the normal type. I'm not talking to Oxford or a Cambridge here, but a normal type of a more regular type of university press, and they will say, we can make a lot of money if you work it in this way. They usually advise you to write another type of book, okay? But the 2 types that can happen is one is more of a crossover book for general readers. I did this a couple times with American Indian Memoirs. The second would be textbook publishers, where the advances come rolling in. Those are the 2 areas, two places that I can see a university press acting as a springboard for you. But usually not with the work they have in hand. It's usually a follow-up work. Other questions? Thank you. We're all done. I appreciate it. And if you want to follow up, you know where to reach me.